Who are the people that you look to, you know, whether musicians, artists, people that careers you look at and think, okay, that.
I mean, it's, last time I saw Bob Dylan here in LA at the Pantages Theater, and he was touring his last album, which had that, I don't know if you guys heard the 17-minute JFK song,
Yes.
Murder Most Foul.
Yeah, I did hear that.
And I thought that was just such a monumental achievement. And I thought, wow, this is the best popular music ever recorded by an 80-year-old. He's pushing into territory we've never seen before. So that was inspiring. But then, if I'm honest, I've always been really excited about like another famous songwriter, of course, is Leonard Cohen. He had cool albums up until the end of his life, but I really think one of the reasons I was always the most interested in him was because he had that period where he went up Mount Baldy, to study with his Zen teacher for like 7 years. And then I started to realize that I've always been so interested in people who take serious time off, or people who kind of disappear for a while. In some ways, those are like the most inspirational stories, because sometimes they come back and do great work like Leonard Cohen, and then sometimes they don't. And even that's kind of cool. I find that inspiring too. Just to know that it's possible.
So you're telling me to go away.
Just like 7 years.
I'll be dead. I haven't got 7 years. No, but I do understand completely what you're saying. And I think about people in comedy, and I think about the people that have done consistently good work. You know, Steve Martin, Marty Short. They're both faster than and funnier than most people I'm ever going to meet. And they've got a bunch of years on me. They don't want me to say how many, but they're 115 years old individually, not added up. And that I always look to those people. And Bob Newhart, who just passed, was so funny and throughout his career, starting in 1960 and going through all these different permutations. He was so smart and so funny and so quick right up to the end of his life. And I lived to be, I believe, 96. I look to those people and I think, no, there is a way to do it. We live in a society where people think they have to be trending all the time and they have to be discussed all the time. And I think, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. People can have a little peak and then they can go away for a while and think and regenerate and then come up with something else. I get that.
Sure.
I like that.
I mean, it's like when there's a We Are the World documentary that was great. A lot of people watched it, really enjoyed it. And you see this moment, Bob Dylan in the mid-'80s, and that a lot of people remarked on. He seems so nervous. And and maybe part of it is he felt like, does my voice sound good on this song, whatever. But also part of it is that Bob Dylan in the mid-'80s was releasing his least loved albums.
Yeah.
They always have a few great songs on them. There's like some classic stuff. But either way, it probably felt a little bit random for him. You know, a guy who in the 60s and 70s crushed it so hard, in the 80s, still trying to like figure out how he could relate to the sounds of the day. And there he was, surrounded by these people who were breaking new ground for how big and influential a pop star could be. Bruce Springsteen in the 80s, Michael Jackson, whatever. So, of course, that was like a weird moment for him in his life. And yet, you know, he consistently, I don't know, he never really went away. He seems to like to work. He tours a lot, releases albums, but, you know, he just like kept on trucking. And eventually he was back to releasing more loved albums. But then you go back and you're like, that was cool work. I don't know what it felt like for him. It looked a little uncomfortable in the documentary.
Yeah, I think in the documentary too, he's around these people who can belt.
Yes.
And of course, that's not Bob Dylan's thing. And so he's working with people who are, you know, kind of saying like, you know, really hit this. And he's like, I don't do that, you know. But you're right. You can take a snapshot of anybody at, you know, a moment in their career, and it doesn't tell you the whole story, you know. And I think it's why I'm always kind of fascinated. It sounds like I'm making a joke, and I'm actually not. I find Obituaries, to be one of the most interesting parts of the newspaper because they tell the whole story. Like there's no more story to this person. This person has passed and they're gone. And sometimes if it's a fascinating person, I read an obituary once and it was Stalin's daughter. And she had lived this, I mean, she's born, she's living in the Kremlin, Stalin's her dad. She lives through all that, but then after he dies, she goes off and she becomes like a jet setter in London in the 60s. But then she ends up at the end of her life, after 15 different chapters, she ends up being this little old lady who's living in like a small hut in Montana. And you think that, yeah, okay. Literally in Montana, someplace in the you know, like in the plains. And you look at the whole arc of her career and it has like 75 different crazy, improbable chapters. Right. And I thought, that's a life. I love, you know, but you could take any one moment from it and not see the whole story if you just checked in on that one moment.
Yeah, totally.
And I think what you're talking about is for musicians, you can check in on them at a moment and not see, you know, not get the right picture of what they're up to or where they're going.
Oh yeah, of course. And then also the you know, timing is everything. So like you release an album, you do your best, you hope that people like it and judge it on its merits. But of course, like when our first album came out, of course, I'm very proud of that album. I think it's a great album. People still discover it today. So, but that was also a little bit of a moment where people were interested in bands from New York.
Yeah.
You know, it was also this moment when the major labels were a little bit confused. I always think of it as this brief historical period between Napster and Spotify, which kids today will never know about. It was a really brief window. So it wasn't the 90s where people were buying CDs hand over fist, nor was it like the Empire Strikes Back moment where the major labels were kind of like, oh, we actually know how to do this again.
We figured it out, yeah.
It was a weird moment, and people were interested in, you know, what they called indie. And, you know, so again, I'm not taking anything away. I'm very proud of the album, but it's good timing.
Yeah.
You know, if people always used to ask us questions like, does it ever bum you out that people are buying less CDs? Pretend it's like 2008. Does CD sales are way down. Do you wish you came out in 1998? And I just remember thinking, I have no idea how we would have fit in 1998. It could have been way worse, actually.
Yeah. Why
would I assume that in 1998 we would have been like Matchbox 20 or something? For all I know, in 1998 it never would have gotten off the ground because. So anyway, these moments.
You guys would have had huge hair in the 80s,
right?
And like be dancing with a snake, you know?
Right. We might have been even more indie in 1998. And so anyway, it's all to say that like there are these bigger moments, you know, the forces of reality that come and go, and there's headwinds and tailwinds, and at some point, you know, that's so much bigger than you.
I know exactly what you're talking about because I was very crazily lucky to get into what I was doing in television in '93, but TV audiences start eroding rapidly about 7 years into when I'm working on a big network and it's becoming more about cable and everything. And so you could have people say to me, don't you wish you had come along, started in like 1958, and then you could have, you're like, this is just a dumb question because then I wouldn't get to do what I'm doing now, or we wouldn't have videos online. So there was a time if you took a snapshot of me in the late 2000s where you'd say, like, well, this is just a terrible time, or to be trying to do this. Be a late night talk show host because it's becoming whatever. If it's becoming less and less relevant, our audiences are getting smaller. But no, it was the perfect time because you could, you know, make it your own. So I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and in that window, was there another time? Because you got to do like in the 90s, the sense of humor you had, would you have been allowed to do that in the?
I wasn't really allowed to do it in the 90s.
Okay,
People I worked for were not happy.